Hey guys, and welcome to another Real vs. Real, where we once again return to Disney. Specifically, where we return to Disney in what seems like its most purest form, or at least its most profitable. Disney princess movies with singing. Lots and lots of singing. The last time we looked at two of the newer Disney princess movies was with Princess and the Frog and Tangled, and seeing as that review is probably the one that I got the most negative comments in, well, apart from maybe Coraline and Paranorman, in large part because I didn't care for the music, still don't, and didn't name a winner, probably Princess and the Frog if we're going with my own preferences, I figure, hey, let's do that again, why not? And look at two of the newest Disney princess musicals, Moana and Frozen. I won't say anything about the music just yet, but I can promise you that there will be a winner this time. What did they have in common? Well, on the surface, not a lot, but then neither did Tangled and Princess and the Frog. Basically, they're just the last two animated Disney princess films that are also musicals. That said, I do have other reasons to compare them. In fact, I decided that I had to compare these two films, which is why you're getting this week instead of a countdown. So let's not waste any more time, roll the new thing. Unlike the last Real vs. Real, these two films were done by the same studio, Disney. Duh. Which means we're looking at very high quality animation, although ironically they are almost complete opposites when it comes to their settings. One takes place almost entirely in a winter wonderland, albeit in the middle of summer. The other is set in what is described vaguely by Disney as a series of islands in the South Pacific, most likely so that they could take liberties with the culture and environment. But as is generally the case with Disney, it didn't stop people from getting angry about them taking liberties with the culture and environment. Ah, Disney. You just can't escape controversy, can you? Both of these movies are beautiful. Frozen uses a cooler color palette and takes full advantage of its winter setting, excelling at those moments where Elsa is using her powers, and Moana squeezes every ounce of vibrancy out of its tropical surroundings, and has an amazing attention to detail. That said, the fact that they are done by the same studio does offer a slight advantage to one, as any animation will most likely be improved in the most recent film, and developers of Moana created software specifically to make it easier to move hair around realistically. Although, if I'm being honest, even if we look past the gorgeous hair movement and strikingly beautiful water effects to the art design itself, specifically the art design for the characters, is also slightly better in Moana. Movies like Tangled and Frozen took the classic Disney princess look and tried to apply it to CG. And I have to admit that occasionally these characters look weird to me. There are moments when they're on screen and there's just something off about them, like the Disney style doesn't quite translate to 3 dimensions at times. Which is odd, especially when you look at other characters in the film who are given more exaggerated features, making these characters stick out even more. Moana does still have those large Disney eyes, but they did give her what they described as a more realistic body type, which in real life means that they just made her skinny rather than, how are you alive? But it does help to get rid of those moments where I'm watching the movie and I'm trying to decide if a character clearly designed to be attractive isn't actually coming off as a bit uncomfortable looking. Point goes to Moana. My opinion of modern Disney music is mostly established. 1 p.m. the usual morning lineup. Sit on my couch, pick a nap, and watch a stream. Eat some snacks, drink coffee, and think about doing stuff. Go back to sleep again at about 3:15. I'll brew a pot of Joe, or maybe 2 or 3. Add a few cat pictures to my gallery. I'll play some games and stay inside and basically do the whole thing again the next day. To me, it always sounds kind of lazy. I guess this is a modern style, and you could make the argument that maybe my taste just doesn't mesh with it, but frankly, I refuse to accept that. I like other modern things with singing in it. I mean, I'm a fan of Steven Universe, and that show rarely wastes the opportunity to break into song, and most of the time they're really good songs. So why shouldn't I be hard on Disney for not bringing the same musical quality as an 11-minute show? No matter how many times I watch Princess and the Frog and Tangled, I just can't get into the music. I even watched both movies again recently after I decided to do this review to see if my opinion had magically changed, and if anything, I was even less into the songs this time around. Frozen is slightly better, but only slightly. Let It Go was the only song that really stood out in the movie, and that song was not nearly good enough for how much it was shoved down our throats. Apart from it, the other songs just don't pack a punch. They don't elicit strong emotions, they don't put a spell on me of any kind, and they don't hold up on their own outside of the film. The songs range from joke songs that aren't quite obvious enough to be funny to a lot of meh stuff with, again, lazy lyrics. So, is Moana any better? Well, to be honest, it's the first Disney musical in a really long time where I actually do like the music. Some of it. Don't get excited. I'm not gonna be cynical here. It's rare for me to like every song in even the classic Disney musicals, and liking most of the songs is still a huge win to my mind. The first 3 songs are great, and do exactly what I want songs in a Disney movie to do. They get me pumped up and pull me into the story. They're reprised in nice ways throughout the rest of the film, and they all feel like they're part of the same soundtrack, with little touches that add to the South Pacific feel. Plus, they managed to do what Tangled, Princess and the Frog, and Frozen songs never quite managed to do. They've been stuck in my head for weeks. I was a little on the fence about You're Welcome the first time I heard it.
When the nights got cold, who stole you fire from down below? You're looking at him, yo!
Yeah, I see what you did there. You needed another syllable. But to be fair, this song actually grew on me a lot after my first viewing, which is another thing that the songs from other modern Disney musicals never managed to do. I would say the only song I'm still lukewarm on is Tamatoa's song Shiny, which, I'm sorry, rhyming Maui with shiny and Heine doesn't work. In fact, in general, using Heine as a song lyric is enough to keep me lukewarm on this song, especially after casually dropping the fact that one of our lead characters was apparently nearly drowned by his mother. Years later, Disney is still the master of confusing tonal shifts. And as I have already said, some of my favorite Disney movies have songs that I dislike in them. Having mostly great music still wins Moana the point over Frozen, who has that one song we're all tired of. I actually ran into several problems while considering how I was going to go over the characters in these movies, which, given that these are both Disney princess films, was kind of an unanticipated problem. But these aren't just Disney princess movies. These are Disney princess movies determined to not be your standard Disney princess movie. And one of the ways they do this is by twisting character roles and playing with your expectations. For instance, I believe Anna is the main character in Frozen, since we spend the majority of the film with her, and Moana is definitely the main character in Moana, because, well, duh. But beyond that, things get complicated pretty quickly. Firstly, if we go into supporting characters, we have Kristoff as a love interest, and maybe we can count Hans as also a love interest, as he does about as much in the movie as any classic Disney prince before turning into a sudden villain. But more likely, love interest is just Kristoff. Moana does not have a love interest, no romantic subplot, and that's great, I'm not complaining. So at this point, maybe we just drop the love interest thing completely and just say supporting character. Then we can compare Kristoff to Maui without too much difficulty, as they do kind of fill a similar enough role in these movies, but we then immediately run into another problem.
Is Elsa support?
Technically, if we're going by what we know about Disney movies, Elsa is the villain. She's a queen, and for decades in the Disney universe, only princesses can be good. Queens are evil. And she has magic powers on top of that. She freezes all of Arendelle, thereby setting off the major conflict, and she curses Anna, a curse that can only be broken by an actor's true love. Elsa acts as this movie's main antagonist for almost the entirety of its runtime before they pull a last-minute twist with Prince Charming. But at the same time, they never really paint her as a villain. She does all of this without knowledge of it and has no desire to curse anyone. Besides, on that logic, I would point out that Maui is also personally responsible for everything that's gone wrong in Moana, but unlike Elsa, who doesn't reverse it because she didn't even know how she did it in the first place, he just doesn't want to. And he's definitely not the villain either, he just starts off as kind of a jerk.
So maybe we just call all three of them support and leave it at that. So then we get into the actual villain, and that's pretty cut and dry. Except that it's not, because one barely qualifies as a villain and the other one is never really a villain to begin with. But for the sake of the review, I can compare these characters, if only because they do both involve a twist.
And lastly, we get to comic relief, or sidekicks, which is a staple of every Disney princess movie and or Disney musical, and I can't lump them in with a support because I'm already having trouble with this without trying to put Elsa and Hey in the same category.
So let's just make characters worth 4 points this time around and give sidekicks their own category, because that at least should be relatively easy. What?
Alright, I apologize for that, but now that we've got it mostly sorted, let's actually take a look at the characters, starting with Anna and Moana. Anna reminds me a lot of Rapunzel, except Rapunzel's response to meeting a stranger is hitting him with a pan, and Anna's is getting engaged to him. I'm recognizing a trend with these new Disney princesses, where Disney gives them these quirky, off-kilter personalities, presumably to show the audience that they are imperfect. It's cute, but I have to admit I'm going to start getting tired of it after a while if more isn't done with them. Amazingly beautiful, but occasionally clumsy is not a major character flaw. I will give her this though. Rapunzel was good at everything, which is just a bit too perfect. Anna is not depicted as an incredibly talented individual, and her naivety is not glossed over. If anything, her poor judgment is almost overly hammered in by multiple characters before it right out screws her over later in the film. And despite the fact that I have a hard time believing her entire kingdom would just let her ride off on her own, it is admirable that she personally felt that she needed to take responsibility for this situation and basically gets to lift her own curse at the end of the movie. That said, Moana straight up gets to be the hero in her movie. It isn't long after meeting Maui before she is basically doing all of the things. The only thing he can really take credit for in this film is teaching her to sail. By the end, he's just acting as a distraction so that she can be awesome. And that's not to say that she's in any way shown as being perfect either. She makes a ton of mistakes early on. In fact, I'll admit she would be screwed several times over in this movie without the ocean. So maybe that's a bit convenient at times, but ultimately she not only decides to take things into her own hands, but succeeds using what she has to her advantage. Basically, she talks and thinks her way out of situations, proving that what this adventure needed was not a big muscular guy with tattoos, but someone who would be able to stop and consider things more carefully. And on top of this, despite the fact that she daydreams of a different life, like every Disney princess before her, she also spends a good amount of time trying to learn to be chief, and is decent at it. The reason she ultimately leaves her island is to help her village. Now, her reasons aren't completely selfless, but why would they be? She's not supposed to be perfect, but she also doesn't outright shirk her responsibilities and genuinely cares for her family and her people.
Point goes to Moana for being the better character and the better female role model.
I actually quite like both Elsa and Kristoff. To be honest, I feel like Elsa would have been a more interesting character to follow than Anna, given that she's the one with the superpowers, is isolated for most of her life, is the one becoming queen, and is a mostly sensible person. I don't dislike Anna by any means, I just feel like we lost the opportunity for a bit more depth with this character. As it is, her role in the film is unusual. She's not quite the main character, not quite the villain. She sets off the main plot and then vanishes for a large chunk of the movie. There's just not a lot for her to do, which is a shame. I'd rather see her in her ice palace than listen to Josh Gad sing for a couple of minutes. Kristoff is a fun enough character. To be honest, I never found any of the Disney princes to be attractive, even as a kid. Found them all pretty boring, still do with their sort of generalized blah good looks. I feel like I would have liked Kristoff with his slightly offbeat design. He also has an understandable lack of social skills given that he was raised by trolls and a few weird quirks which I think makes him more likable. His developing relationship with Anna is okay, although I have noticed that Disney seems to have traded in the love at first sight cliche for the old hate at first sight or headbutting heroes trope. You know the one, where they don't get along, but then they bond over an experience or series of experiences. Throw in at least one life-threatening situation in there, why not? Where one or both of them save each other in some way, but then there's a misunderstanding or one of the characters screw up, and they split up for a while before inevitably getting back together at the end. Actually, to its credit, Frozen does manage to avoid the cliche where the characters wind up arguing and having a falling out, but does still find a way to split them up for a bit.
And if you don't believe me that this is almost every single Disney relationship now, I would like to point out that even in the movies where the main character doesn't have a love interest, this is still the dynamic.
Alright, so let's move on to Moana. How do I describe Maui? He's kind of like if Zapp Brannigan and Gaston were smarter, allowed to develop as characters, and admitted that their arrogance stemmed from deep-seated insecurities and abandonment issues. I actually adore Maui, despite the fact that half the time I find arrogant characters to be more annoying than funny. Like his song, The Dude Grew on Me over the course of the film. I know his design caused some issues because it was seen as insensitive towards the culture, but personally, I think it's great. This sort of massive dude with living tattoos. If only we could get some designs for Disney heroines that are this unique. He has a few lines that are a little groan-worthy, mostly because this character seems to be our source for pop culture references and fourth wall jokes. Some of them work.
Okay, first, I'm not a princess. I'm the daughter of the chief.
Same difference.
No.
If you wear a dress and you have an animal sidekick, you're a princess.
Some of them do not.
If you start singing, I'm gonna throw up.
Dude, you were literally singing like 15 minutes ago. And it is slightly distracting that we have a young Hawaiian actress playing Moana, but Maui, the trickster demigod, talks like, well, The Rock. I'm not saying the guy doesn't do decent voice work, and I will even admit he's a better singer than you'd expect, but yeah, I mean, it's Disney. They were going to shove at least one popular actor in there. I guess I should just be happy that Moana wasn't voiced by Emma Watson or something.
Now, to be honest, this was actually probably the most difficult decision I had to make during this review. But I think I am actually going to give it to Elsa and Kristoff because, honestly, I like them better than most of the other characters in Frozen. And while I do genuinely like Maui, he does fall victim to what we'll call some unworthy comedic moments.
When you use a bird to write with, it's called tweeting.
No, stop.
It wouldn't be a Disney animated film without sidekicks, would it? At least two, because sometimes you need sidekicks for your sidekicks. In Frozen, it's Sven and Olaf. To his credit, Olaf is not nearly as annoying as you would expect him to be, and even gets a few good lines.
Gentlest, warmest person ever. Oh, look at that. I've been impaled.
But he does still walk that fine line of annoyance throughout most of the film. Sven, meanwhile, is the other kind of sidekick, usually an honor reserved for a horse of some kind, meaning he's almost a normal animal but with above average intelligence. I do like how they sort of poke fun at the talking animal thing. I think that's one of the jabs that work in Frozen because it's a bit more subtle than some of the others. In Moana, the most traditional sidekick is Hey Hey, and I've gotta ask.
This is a joke, right? I'm not being negative or facetious. The chicken is funny. I'm just asking, this is Disney making a joke, right?
I mean, we have this ludicrously marketable character that just oozes Disney princess sidekick and who is all over the opening scenes and on the front and back of the DVD case. And then Disney is just like, yeah, this pig is barely in the movie. Instead you get the dumb chicken. So this was a way of Disney being cute, right? Don't get me wrong, it's great. Another thing I was never super fond of as a kid was a vast majority of the cutesy sidekick animals. But I would have found this chicken funny. I still find this chicken funny. How can you not find this dumb chicken funny? The other sidekick characters get major points as well because of how inventive they are. Moana really didn't want to be conventional when it came to their side characters. For instance, the ocean, which is a character in this movie. It's interesting how effective a film with some talent behind it can convince you that something with no facial features of any kind has a distinct personality. Then there are Maui's tattoos, more specifically the tattoo rendition of himself, which basically acts as his conscience. Man, you can make as many cynical comments about a tattoo conscience in a Disney movie as you want. You will never convince me that this is not an awesome idea.
So Moana wins because stupid chicken, the ocean, and tattoo conscience beats the crap out of reindeer and annoying snowman. So let's move on to the villain.
In Frozen, this winds up being Hans. Making the Prince Charming type character your villain is not a bad idea. The only problem is that with the way this character is presented throughout the movie, it makes no freaking sense. Why does he smile dreamily to himself after he first meets Anna if he's planning to trick his way into ruling her kingdom? Why does he offer to go with her when she goes after her sister? Why does he go after her when she goes missing? Why does he talk Elsa out of hurting the two guards and save her life if he's just gonna try and kill her later? I can accept that this is not true love because, yeah, it clearly isn't. I can even accept that Hans has an ulterior motive to getting close to Anna because he does mention his brothers at one point. But I have a really hard time swallowing that this character becomes this freaking evil this fast. He turns into a monster by the end of the movie, and there's no evidence that this is present earlier on. It doesn't make sense, and therefore is a bad twist.
To be fair, Disney totally cheats with Moana's twist too, though.
For much of the film, we assume the main villain is Taka, a lava creature hanging out on the border islands of Te Fiti, described in the open narration as an island goddess with the power to create life. Taka, as well as many others, were supposedly after Te Fiti's heart, and it was eventually Maui who stole it. But before he could escape, Taka attacked, wanting the heart for himself. That's the legend anyways. We find out by the end of the film that Taka is actually Te Fiti. It's what she became after her heart was removed. But there's a bit of a plot hole if you start to think about it. I can totally believe that after 1,000 years, people would come up with a name for this lava monster. It makes sense that if a legend is told for 1,000 years, you would name the creature responsible for hitting Maui out of the sky. I have a harder time believing that after being stranded on an island for 1,000 years, Maui himself would know this lava monster is called Taka. That suggests that this thing already existed and was already named, but at the end of the film we see Taka as a direct result of Maui stealing the heart. So why does Maui know this thing's name?
The sad thing about this is, though, is that it could easily be solved with just some minor changes. You could either not have Maui refer to Taka by name, or have Moana inform him of it at some point. Problem solved.
The other slight cop-out is Taka only has a visible spiral on its chest at the moment when you're supposed to notice the spiral on its chest. Now I know why they do this. They want the twist to be a surprise. But you could easily change both of these things and still surprise a good amount of people. In fact, a twist tends to have more impact when it's possible for your audience to guess it or go back and notice these little details. This is cheating. That said, not only does this twist make perfect sense, but it also ties into the theme of the film, which is ultimately don't let others define you, you choose who you are. Could it have been executed a little better? Sure. but it's still a good twist. I critique it out of fairness. I don't have a problem with the plot point itself, especially considering how incredibly beautiful this reveal is. Point goes to Moana, but Disney, it is okay to give your audience a hint or two.
So finally we come to story, and this is the main reason why I wanted to compare these two films. Both of these movies try to be non-standard Disney princess films, and I do genuinely like both of these movies. But Frozen tries way too hard.
To the expense of common sense at times. Now, I do think some of this works. I enjoy a lot of the jokes where Disney pokes fun at itself. I think the true love twist at the end of the movie is great. Much better handled than the Hans twist anyway. But enjoyable or not, the flow of the story is interrupted by the movie's desire to not be a typical Disney princess movie. And because it's trying so hard to play with your expectations, it often sacrifices structure and logic. There are a lot of moments where the plot is forwarded by convenience. Now, I'm not going to pretend that the story in Moana is something that's never been done before, because structurally, Moana is pretty standard. In fact, I would say this setup is so ingrained in the DNA of these kinds of movies, it would be amazing if it didn't follow this composition. Young, experienced hero, chosen to go on an adventure, paired with a companion they butt heads with, eventually winning them over before experiencing what I remember Aardman referring to as the get out of here moment, in which the characters experience what seems like an impossible obstacle and have a falling out. Then our hero decides, screw it, I've come this far, I'm not going to give up now, even if I have to do it myself. Eventually their companion or companions come around and help them, and they are victorious. So it's definitely a predictable story, with the only real variation being the twist at the end. But it's completely enjoyable all the way through. It has a strong female lead, made stronger by the fact that the movie is not wrapped up in gender roles. It is a unique and refreshing Disney princess movie, and achieves this without sacrificing story and characters, because while it is trying to play with your expectations in some ways, it does so with subtlety. Every character is enjoyable down to the sidekicks. The music ties into the story well, often enhancing it to the point where certain scenes would not have had the same impact without it. And as I've already said, there's a common theme throughout that ties into every major character.
I like Frozen, despite the fact that I'm extremely sick of seeing its merchandise and tired of the song. But Moana is better, and Moana is better because it does everything better. So there you have it. Moana wins. I'm the animated heroine, and Disney, just get Lin-Manuel Miranda to do all of your musicals from now on. I mean, you won't, but just think about it, alright? I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.